Welcome back to Logan Rando Aquascaping. My name is Logan, and today I have a beginner's guide for you on keeping Caridina shrimp. Now, Caridina shrimp are some of the most sought after critters that we keep in this hobby of aquascaping, but they come with some difficulty, and most of that difficulty can be overcome by just understanding what is in your water and how to achieve ideal water parameters for Caridina. I've been successfully keeping Caridina shrimp and breeding them in my high-tech tanks for over a year now, so I feel I'm in a good position to give you guys some information about how to do it like I did. So without further ado, let's dive into the guide. I want to give you guys just the very basics about some of the parameters they do most well in, but even within those specific parameters, there's an acceptable range and some slow, mild fluctuations are okay. So let's start with pH. Caridina shrimp do best in acidic water conditions. Additionally, if we're talking about GH, which is the general hardness of the water, in other words, how much calcium and magnesium are dissolved in the water, they do best in GH 4 to 6. Next up is one of the most important values, and that is KH, and that is your water's carbonate hardness or its ability to resist fluctuations in pH. And this is where Caridina shrimp are a little bit special. They do best at a very, very low KH. So it's very important that you keep your KH at 0 to 2. And if you're looking at a general reading of all the different things dissolved in your water, they're gonna do best in TDS of 100 to 180 parts per million TDS. And finally, they do just fine at lower temps, which is the typical temperature you're gonna be keeping a planted aquarium at, anywhere from 68 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. So fairly typical for a planted aquarium. However, they do not tolerate much warmer temperatures, something you'd find in, say, a discus tank. So those are some of the basic parameters that are going to guide you in the right direction. But if you want to really understand what these parameters mean, how they affect your water chemistry, how to measure them, I'm going to be linking some Boost Plant videos down below in the description. These are videos that I've created for Boost Plant where we really dive into each and every one of those parameters in depth. Okay, so now that we know the basic parameters, let's talk about some different tips for maximizing your success with Caridina. And tip number one is to know your water conditions inside and out. So whether your water is coming from a city or a well, or you're using RODI water, you need to know exactly what your water is constituted of. Essentially, the most important ones you're going to want to know are the ones we mentioned earlier. So I would step one, start with TDS, because this is going to give you a rough idea of how hard your water is. Generally, you want softer water. And then I would look into GH and KH. If you have really, really high KH or rock hard water with a super high GH, you're probably not going to have a ton of success with Caridina shrimp. So that's when you may want to look into creating your own water or distilling it down in the purified water and then remineralizing that water with some minerals. And the next tip is to buy local. So oftentimes many hobbyists get really frustrated when they're keeping shrimp because they go to their local fish store. The fish store just got a huge shipment in of shrimp. Maybe they came all the way from Asia and they grab them on day one of the store receiving them. Then they put them into their tank and they lose 90% of their shrimp. Those shrimp are under so much stress, and they may already be predisposed to different diseases from all the travel time. Plus, in the last 72 hours to a week, they've been going through so many different water parameters, their immune system and their bodies are just not ready for any more fluctuations. So while it is really important to support your local fish stores as much as possible, when it comes to shrimp, these guys are expensive and you don't want to risk losing most of them. So if you're going to go the fish store route, see if they breed their shrimp in store, because then there's a good chance that they'll be adapted to water conditions that are similar to yours, and perhaps several generations have been bred in that store. But if they just arrived from overseas that day, you're taking a massive risk, and these shrimp are expensive. And this is where I recommend turning to local hobbyists, get on Facebook groups, Instagram, and talk to people and see if there's someone who's breeding several generations of shrimp and you could purchase some. Ask them what kind of water they're keeping them in, and if they're similar to yours, you're gonna really maximize your chance of success and minimize any potential losses. So my next step is pertinent to the process of adding the actual shrimp to your tank. And during this process, I highly recommend drip acclimating the shrimp. I have an entire video on why this is important. It'll be linked down below in the description. But generally speaking, it has something to do with the osmotic pressure of a shrimp's body. And when you put them in one condition versus a drastically different one, they're gonna rapidly die. So it's really important, especially if you have very different water parameters, to drip acclimate over the course course of many hours. Some people even drip acclimate over the course of like 12 to 24 hours. I myself like to do 4 to 6 hours, but slow and steady on the acclimation rate. Add a little bit of new water to the shrimp as slowly as possible. And once again, you'll maximize your chances of success and minimize the chance of losing a bunch of beautiful, new, expensive shrimp. And when deciding when to add shrimp to your tank, make sure that the tank is beyond cycled. Make sure that this tank has been set up for many weeks, even months if possible, just so you're not risking any sort of funny business, because oftentimes many beginners make the mistake of thinking their tank is cycled when it's actually not, and ammonia spikes are just going to kill anything, especially Caridina shrimp. So play it safe, take your time, make sure things are established, make sure you're past that algae and ammonia phase, then you can safely add the shrimp. So the next tip pertains to water changes. And if you're keeping your shrimp in just a glass tank with water and really nothing else, then you can probably get by with very few teeny tiny little water changes. But somebody like me, I keep high-tech planted aquariums with CO2 and I dose nutrients, so I'm doing water changes frequently. And I have realized that with Caridina shrimp, it is better to do more frequent water changes per week in smaller volumes. So rather than doing one big, say 50 to 70% water change per week, do 2 30% water changes per week and spread them out over the course of 3 or 4 days. Anytime you lose shrimp directly after a water change, you know that you've done something wrong or that there is something suspicious in your water. So that should be a major red flag. And my final tip regarding keeping Caridina shrimp successfully has to do with knowing your goals. Are you out there to try and breed Caridina? Do you want to end up with hundreds of them in a few months so that you can sell them to other hobbyists? Or are you maybe somebody like me who wants to have a bunch of Caridina shrimp to enhance the aesthetic of the ecosystem of their tank and provide a little bit of algae control? They're both very different paths. So I would suggest if you're getting into it to breed, then maybe don't mess with a high-tech planted aquarium. Try and really focus on breeding, which would mean no CO2, not too intensive light, and smaller, less frequent water changes. But if you're not in it to breed and you just want them to enhance your tank, just know that they're not going to breed as frequently in a high-tech setup, but they still will. Things will just be a little bit slower, and it will really benefit you if you keep them with small fish that aren't going to gobble them up. So those are all the tips I have for you in today's video. Obviously, this is not meant to be the end-all be-all on Caridina shrimp. I just wanted to give you guys some of the very basics and some general tips, but I would suggest that you really deep dive into what these shrimp need, and when in doubt, go back and reference this video if you're having some failures, see if you're using the tips I'm giving you, and just supplement your research by deep diving through articles, and also talk to local hobbyists and see what they're doing. So thank you so much for watching. This has been Logan with Logan Rando Aquascaping, and I look forward to seeing you guys and gals next time. Bye-bye.